Alex Eala has just entered the 2026 Miami Open as the number 32 seed. Seeded, protected, and dangerous. 4 days ago, she was taking apart Coco Gauff at Indian Wells before Linda Noskova delivered a harsh 6-2, 6-2 wake-up call in the round of 16. But here's what no one is talking about. Eala is sitting on 390 ranking points that are about to expire, a ticking clock that forces her into a semi-final or bust situation. The WTA had been giving her some of the smallest scheduling slots in Dubai for months before fans pushed back online. Then suddenly, center court, night session, prime time. Maybe it's a coincidence, but Rafael Nadal, the man who helped shape her, has been watching every step of this. The academy that developed her game, the private message after Miami 2025, the hitting session 1 year after his retirement. Nadal doesn't move quietly. When the system around his top students starts making questionable decisions, it gets attention. Something is being protected here, and it might not be Eala. If this perspective is new to you and you want angles that mainstream coverage avoids, subscribe now, because the scheduling at this tournament tells a story the WTA doesn't want highlighted. Let's get into it. Let's start with the scheduling record, because that's where the real story is. Early in 2026, Alex Eala arrives at the Dubai Tennis Championships ranked inside the top 50, coming off a breakout year that included a WTA final at Eastbourne, a WTA 125 title in Guadalajara, and a year-end ranking of number 50. By almost every measurable fan metric, she is the most talked-about player on the women's tour. Filipino fans are traveling internationally to watch her. Venues feel different when her name appears in the order of play. Ticket sales shift. Social media explodes. And yet, in her first 2 rounds in Dubai, she wasn't given the prime closing slot on center court, the most valuable position in tournament scheduling, reserved for the match expected to draw the biggest audience. Fans noticed immediately, and the backlash online was intense and loud. Tennis communities across social platforms pointed out the obvious contradiction. Here is your most marketable young star, the one filling stadiums, and she's being treated like a filler match. A major tennis outlet even acknowledged the criticism, noting that Eala often missed out on the main event slot and was repeatedly scheduled at unusual times on smaller courts. That's not fan exaggeration, that's documented pattern. Then quietly things changed. In round 3 in Dubai, she was placed on center court in the night session as the closing match. Suddenly, the scheduling matched what the numbers had been showing for weeks. Eala versus Jasmine Paolini, a top 10 player and 2-time Grand Slam finalist, was given the spotlight. It was the correct decision. But the real question is why it took public pressure to make that happen, and what that initial resistance says about how the WTA views Eala's role in the system. Now here's where the Dubai situation becomes more complex, because it's not just about neglect. When the quarterfinal arrived, Eala was moved again, this time to open the night session instead of closing it for her match against Coco Gauff. On the surface, it seems like a small scheduling adjustment, but in reality, the impact was significant. Alina Svitolina was scheduled to play after Eala in that session. The issue is simple. Most of the crowd was there for the Filipino star. Once her match ended, there was a real possibility that many fans would leave before Svitolina even stepped onto the court. Svitolina, a former world number 3 and 4-time WTA 1000 champion, could have ended up playing in front of a half-empty stadium, not due to a lack of respect, but because of a scheduling decision that placed her behind Eala's massive draw. There was some logic behind the move. If Eala closed the session, Filipino fans, a huge and passionate audience, would be watching past 1 a.m. local time. Moving her earlier gave millions of viewers back home a more reasonable time to tune in. That's a fair consideration, but the execution felt awkward and raised a bigger question about whether the WTA has a clear strategy for managing Eala's popularity or is simply reacting week by week without long-term planning. This is the structural issue. Eala is not a typical rising star. She doesn't yet have the ranking history to automatically secure top slots. She's still climbing, but she draws audience numbers that surpass players ranked much higher. The tour's scheduling system is built on rankings and seedings, not popularity. So a player who is ranked number 32 but is arguably the most watched player in the sport creates real tension. That tension has been handled inconsistently, and inconsistency at this level always creates the impression of something more deliberate, whether it actually is or not. So let's address the difficult question directly. Is there evidence that the WTA is trying to hold Eala back at the Miami Open 2026? There is no document, no leaked information, and no official statement suggesting any kind of sabotage. What does exist, however, is a system that seems unprepared for what she represents. The ranking system doesn't factor in cultural influence. The scheduling structure wasn't designed for a player whose fan base spans a country of over 100 million people in a completely different time zone. The decisions surrounding her in 2026, including shifting time slots and inconsistent court assignments, suggest an organization reacting instead of planning. Rafael Nadal sees all of this, and his continued visible involvement in Eala's career is not accidental. When he returned to a tennis court 1 year after retirement, it was specifically to train with her at his academy in Mallorca. He shared the session publicly, tagged her, and told his millions of followers how good it felt to be back. This is someone who spent decades carefully managing his public image. He doesn't make random gestures. The fact that Eala is the player who brought him back onto a court, even casually, says something intentional about how he views her future in the sport. His uncle, Tony Nadal, who coached him to 22 Grand Slam titles and has decades of experience developing elite players, was present in Eala's player box during her match at the 2025 Miami Open. He wasn't watching remotely, he was there courtside, fully invested. After that run, he said clearly that once Eala fully refines her game, she could be among the best players in the world. That's not empty praise. He pointed out that she defeated the world number 2 and number 5 in the same tournament without hesitation. His belief in her potential is genuine. Now place that backing into the context of what the Miami Open 2026 means for her career. She arrives ranked around number 28 in the live rankings after earning 120 points at Indian Wells. She defeated Goff there before Noskova ended her run. That's not poor form, that's one off day against a strong opponent. Her form is solid, and based on her own statements, her confidence is higher than ever. She said after Indian Wells that she has grown, gained experience through both wins and losses, and now truly believes she belongs at this level. But the 390 ranking points she earned from last year's Miami semifinal are expiring at this event. That's the real pressure. If she exits early, her points total drops sharply, her ranking falls, and the protection that ensures entry into major WTA events weakens. She currently holds 1,542 ranking points, and a first-round loss would cut 390 of those. The consequences would affect her seeding at the French Open, her entry into the summer hardcourt season, and possibly her positioning heading into Wimbledon. This is not minor. This is the most important week of her career so far, and she knows it. That's why the scheduling issue matters even more in this context. If the WTA continues to handle her match timing and court placement inconsistently, putting her in situations where crowd dynamics or physical demands work against her, then the result of that mismanagement, intentional or not, could be damaging at the worst possible moment. There is at least one positive sign. The Miami Open itself has promoted Eala as a major attraction for 2026, placing her alongside top names as a key storyline. The WTA's own platforms reflect that positioning. The tournament begins on March 17th, with the women's final set for March 28th, and the draw released on March 15th. The recognition is there on paper. The real question is whether the execution on the ground will match it over the next 2 weeks. What has been built in Mallorca over years, her movement, her left-handed forehand, her competitive mindset, and her ability to challenge players ranked far above her, is about to face its biggest test. Not just against opponents, but against a system that still doesn't fully know how to handle her presence. The WTA has a player who is expanding the sport into a region it has never fully reached at this scale. The scheduling decisions will show whether they understand that opportunity and are ready to support it, or if they will allow routine habits to override smart decision-making at a critical moment. Eala is ready. The fans will show up. The points are on the line. The only question left is whether the tour will stay out of her way. If this breakdown gave you a perspective you haven't seen in mainstream coverage, hit subscribe now. We go deeper into every major tournament, every controversial decision, and every story that official coverage doesn't frame this way. Drop your prediction for Eala's Miami run in the comments. We're reading all of them.